When we look around the VA today, as these three scenarios demonstrate, what we find is that there is a Model A, or authority-based communication model, in place in most instances around VA. The characteristics of that model include controlling and winning. We do not lose under any circumstances. It's about winning. All right? We're going to attack any negative behavior. Think back to the status cafe exercise. We see that Model A being played out in the character that I did in that scenario. Control and win, sometimes with a single finger. Do not lose. Control the environment. All right? Secondly, attack negative behavior, just as I attacked poor Michelle when I didn't get my salad on time. All right? We see that happening in conversations in the VA all the time. Emphasizing personal superiority. I know. I'm the expert. I'm in charge. Emphasis on the personal superiority. The primary strategies of this model include controlling the environment at all costs, no matter what it takes. Treating our own views as unquestionably correct in all cases, and do not encourage public testing. Don't confuse me with the facts. My mind's made up. Right. Another strategy is to make negative, covert assumptions and evaluations, like my character did in the status cafe. Obviously, she had been in this business very long. She didn't know this. Well, I didn't test that. I didn't ask. I didn't check it out. She made a covert evaluation and proceeded on that basis. The consequences, and you see them all around you all the time. Defensive, shallow relationships. Low levels of trust. Low levels of choice or creativity. We get locked in. We get in a groove or a rut, if you will. What we want to try to do now is begin to make a transformation from this Model A, or authority-based, to a Model T, or team-based approach to communication. Let's take a look at how this high-status model matches up line by line with the low-status model we see around us today. In the Model T model, we have a shared environment with no need to win. Now that bothers some people. We have this thing about winning in our heads, culturally. We'll talk about that in detail in a minute. We seek to understand negative behavior. Something happens, somebody does something that's negative. First, I want to know why. Before I just attack, I want to know why this happened. I want to understand that negative behavior. And I want to assign a value to a shared understanding of the real situation I'm faced with. That's a Model T approach. The strategies then will include sharing control of a safe environment. We're going to talk about safety in some depth in a minute. We want evaluations that are supported by observable examples and credible data. It isn't true just because I say it's true. I want to be able to show what the reality of the situation is, and encourage public testing of those evaluations. So if I'm sharing the environment and I'm making an evaluation, I want to share that and encourage public testing. I want to say, Vicki, here's what I think's going on. Talk to me. Am I right? Do we see it the same way? We're sharing the environment. We're encouraging public testing of our evaluation. That's the strategy. The consequences will include proactive, energized, positive, creative, problem-solving relationships focused on solving the problem. Higher levels of trust because we're both focused on the same objective. And higher levels of choice or creativity. We're going to let the field be wide open in terms of finding solutions to the challenges we face. So how do we make the transition? How do we go from what we're seeing around us now into this high-level, high-status model of communication? Well, we looked at all of the cases that we studied, and it all came down to transactions. So let's talk about this idea of no need to win. That's a problem for a lot of people. So let's explain what it does mean and what it doesn't mean. In our culture, we're taught from the earliest age that winning is everything. So when I say there's no need to win, people go, wait a minute. That's alien concept. All right, here's what it means. We can think of every conversation we have with somebody as a transaction. And we can think of a transaction in the shape of a triangle. So suppose, for example, that I'm going to talk to Corinne about a situation at work. We are about to have a transaction. That transaction is really a triangle shape, where I am on one corner, Corinne is on second corner, and our objective, whatever the issue is that we're going to talk about, is out there. That's our objective. Now, when we say that there is no need to win, we're talking about this leg of the triangle. Okay? There is no need to win between Corinne and me. This is not a zero-sum game like poker, where Corinne can only win if I lose, where I can only succeed if Corinne fails. That's what we mean when we say there's no need to win. What we're saying is Corinne and I are not going to put our energy and our emphasis and our effort on this leg of the triangle. Instead, each of us is going to focus on the objective. We're going to put our effort and our energy and our emphasis on the objective. This is where the win takes place, out here. Here, there is no need to win. And by eliminating the need to win here, we guarantee or we help ensure the win out here. That's what we mean. Okay? Now, that's a pretty simple concept to understand. The difficulty is, how do we get there? How do we get from where we are today to that kind of approach to things? When you think about the three confrontations that you saw, how likely is it that anybody is walking out of those confrontations thinking this, that number one truth? Is Harriet thinking that when she walks out that morning? Is Chuck thinking that? Thinking that? No. Tom, Dr. Breesbrough, any of these people thinking the number one truth? No. Why? Okay. We looked at all these cases. We examined these conflicts, these high-pressure situations, and what we decided was that the symbol that best represented all of these kinds of scenarios was the closed fist. You think about the three you just saw. Think about Mark storming off the job with that coat thrown over his shoulder in a closed fist. You think about Chuck raising that fist in frustration and anger at not being heard for such a long period of time. You think about Tom going outside to take that walk that Lisa wants him to take. And you can just picture him walking around outside. Dr. Breesbrough, that clenched fist. How many times have you gotten involved in a high-pressure confrontational situation and come out of it realizing that you're all knotted up? Ever happened to you? It happens all the time. So we said, all right, if that's the symbol of the problem, how can we represent the solution? What can we do to begin to open those closed fists? And so this open hand became for us the symbol of the solution. If this is the problem, this is the solution. And as a result, what we're going to present to you today is a 5-element model that we call the open hand technique. And we call it that because it can be symbolized and remembered using the fingers of only one hand. We're going to walk through it right now. Element number 1, the most important element. We call it number 1 on the thumb. And that is to find or create a safe environment for communicating. Safety. Think safety first. Now, we're not talking about physical safety. We're not talking about the kind of safety where you put out the little piece of mojado cone because the floor is wet, right? We're talking about creating for yourself and maintaining in yourself a safe communicating environment. An environment for communicating that is mentally, emotionally, and psychologically safe for when you communicate. The first question you have to ask yourself is, how safe am I? How safe is it for people to approach me and communicate with me? And you have to be brutally honest with yourself. Because most of us can be safe when the pressure is not on. I beg your pardon? Oh, okay, so Vicki wants to know if we're going to get this on a card, because she's not going to waste her time writing all this stuff down again. Yes, you're going to get it on. Okay? How safe am I? It's easy to be safe when there's no pressure. But when the pressure's on, sometimes safety goes away. So you've got to be brutally honest with yourself. You've got to find or create that safe communicating environment for yourself. That's number one. If you don't have that, you're done. All right? Now, we're going to add a second finger. And we use the forefinger in this case because there are two parts to element number 2. And it is this. When you communicate, you need to do so being calm and clear. If you take those two fingers and kind of curve them, you form the letter C, which helps you remember that. So the two elements here, the two parts of this element, are to communicate being calm and clear. All right? Now, it isn't horribly difficult to communicate with other people being safe at all times and being calm and clear. However, it does require that we make conscious choices. That's the hard part, is remembering to make the right choice. Let me illustrate that. Suppose that there is an issue at work that I want to talk to Becky about. And it's an important issue. So I'm going to approach her and ask her to work with me on this. Now, I've got all kinds of choices. I have to decide how I'm going to approach Becky with this situation. I got tons of choices, don't I? I can do almost anything I want, right? So here's one choice I could make. Becky, I just found out that up on 5, there's been 3 major infections in the last 4 months. Now, somebody's going to wind up dead up there if we don't do something about it. We got to get on. Let's go. I can do that. All right. I could make a different choice, though. I could take a different approach. Here's another choice, another option that I could use. Becky, got a minute? I just found out that up on 5, we have had 3 major infections in the last 4 months. Now, clearly somebody could wind up seriously ill or even dead over that. You got a whole lot more experience with hygiene and sanitation than I do, so I'd really like to work with you on this. Can we start now, or should I get with you after lunch, or wait? Tomorrow's good? Okay. So I split things off. All right, now here's the question. Which of those two approaches was safer? Clearly the second, obviously. But let's be specific. What did I do differently the second time that made it safer? Talk to me specifically. What did I do differently?
You weren't aggressive in your approach.
I wasn't aggressive in my approach. I wasn't bossing her. Well, that's one thing. Yes, ma'am.
Physically, you sat down and stood over her.
And how important is that? Okay, I put us on an equal status level physically, didn't I? Becky, did that help us to achieve equal status psychologically? Absolutely did. Because I was talking down to her the first time, right? Okay. What else did I do differently, Audrey?
You clearly delineated what the problem was, and then you respected the position.
Okay, and that's two different things. First of all, I was clearer in my presentation about what was going on. All right? And I respected her how?
By acknowledging her skill.
This is very important. I let Becky know why I wanted her help on this. And in the process, I complimented her and raised her status. It's important to do that, but when you do, there are 2 characteristics that it must have that are critical. It has to be relevant, and it has to be sincere.